Across the Sun by Jason Pagano and Bill Robinson. Chapter 58, Mother and Child Reunion. Niwa needed some time to prepare the most important summon spell she had ever cast. She said it was essential to have prepared a general outline of what she was going to say about the person.
They have to feel special. They have to feel important when someone calls on them. Everyone deserves that,
she said. Aiden cooked rice using materials he'd found in the kitchen of the building with the collapsed roof. He missed the chimenea outside their home so much. The siblings shared the rice and other provisions Obery had given them with Mitra and Sholfi. From a respectable distance, the siblings finally had an opportunity to see the newborns.
Are you leaving?
Mitra asked.
I heard you all talking about going home. Where's home for you?
We're definitely going to bring you to the Tikas camp first,
Aiden said, his mouth full of rice. He wanted to establish this plan as fact before they could argue about it.
I hope we all get home soon,
Mitra said.
My children will have a home, and they'll have names.
Clyde looked at the pups and allowed herself to feel moved by Mitra's words. She envisioned the dormitory upstairs in their childhood home, remembering every last detail of the wooden floor and the placement of the beds. She wanted these pups to grow up and one day sneak out of a dormitory so they could conspire together on the roof under the stars. After dinner, Niwa stopped fussing with her locks and sat up straight.
I think I'm ready now.
Deciding against using obsidian again, Niwa retrieved the same glossy plates she'd used to summon the roadhouse proprietor. She asked Aiden to hold the plate at a certain angle as the sun was starting to retreat in the west. She felt self-conscious as her siblings watched expectantly, but channeled that into feelings of potency.
While raising a family and running a farm away from most of civilization, Saba taught her children about so many mysterious and magical things existing far beyond the world they knew.
Niwa spoke in a dignified tone.
Wait, what are you doing?
Aiden stammered. Her words didn't pertain to Gorram. Ricario placed a hand on his brother's shoulder and shook his head gently. The elf had expected to hear a speech about Gorram as well, but knew to trust his sister's intuition. Niwa did not break her focus.
She protected her family from approaching invaders with a dense fog cloud that obscured their home, giving everyone time to escape. And her children miss her so much right now.
Her voice wavered as she struggled to get the last words out. Tears began running down her face. Aiden gasped as their mother materialized in front of them. The elderly dwarf woman looked healthy and lovely, just as he had remembered her. The siblings stared at the apparition in complete shock. They were all afraid to conclude their mother was dead. They didn't want to know her spirit was visiting them from the afterlife.
I hoped beyond hope I would see you again.
Saba's eyes widened and she felt overwhelmed with emotion.
You're all together. This is...
Niwa ran forward and hugged her mother before she could finish her thought. The two exchanged a warm embrace, and the gnome was astonished at how lifelike she felt. The others, including the typically standoffish Clyde, eagerly hugged their mother. Her love was something they hadn't realized they needed so desperately.
We have so many questions for you. Rook has been working on a way for us to return home. He said there might be a spell about it in your notes.
Niwa said quickly as she sniffed away her tears. Saba looked confused and concerned as she listened to her daughter. She heard every word, but she was noticing the large statue behind her children. Then she noticed Ricario's turquoise arm.
I know I owe you all an explanation.
Saba's voice grew solemn.
But I need to know what you're doing in this place first.
Do you mean this world, or do you mean this temple area?
Aiden asked.
I knew this day would come, but not quite like this.
Saba said, studying Aiden.
Your father tried to protect you from the divine, but you must have always known about your potential.
My potential? Where is Professor Gorram?
Aiden asked.
I don't know how to summon more than one person at a time,
Niwa said.
It's just that when we left home, everything happened so fast, and Gorram seemed really focused. I know it was an emergency, but it feels like he treated the events of that day, and many other things before that, as secrets. Maybe he thought we were too young to understand.
You're not wrong about that, Niwa.
Saba said.
Your father and I made some very difficult decisions regarding you four.
She let out a deep sigh.
We made decisions on behalf of you all, but we never wanted to put you in any danger. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Clyde felt very uncomfortable seeing her mother distraught. She asked the first question on her mind to interrupt this feeling.
If Niwa can summon you, does this mean you're dead?
The Tikas asked with no inflection. She tried to gauge Saba's realness as though it related to her trustworthiness.
My dear,
Saba replied uneasily.
we all escaped that awful day. I'm sorry to have worried you, but your father and I are still alive. What we should have told you is that they were after us, not after you children. I reluctantly agreed with your father you'd all be safer without us. He tried to train you for that inevitable day when you'd be on your own. I'd always hoped we would have had more time. You are still so young.
He thought we'd be safer in some strange world alone?
Aiden felt incredulous, trying not to speak defensively.
Aiden, stop it!
Niwa shouted.
No more fighting, just listen!
Please.
Saba said softly. She could see how upset her children were.
I want to explain, but there's so much. I don't even know where to begin. Gorram and I lived in another world when we were much younger. We dwarves get restless staying in one place too long. I should have told you about the dwarven fortune before. But I told your father we needed to stay in one home long enough for you all to grow up. Each of you had been in terrible circumstances before we adopted you. I told Gorram raising you together in that dwarven outpost would be stabilizing. It would be good for you emotionally. I just wish we'd had more time together.
Niwa tried to sound gentle.
There's a house nearby that looks so much like our home. We met the woman who lives there. Her name is Aubrey, and she's also a dwarf, but she didn't recognize your or Gorham's names. Why are the outpost houses so similar?
I asked her about the dwarven fortune.
Rakaru said.
I read about that in your journal. You said it reshaped the destiny of all the dwarves, and it was the reason you and Gorham wanted children. Aubrey didn't want to talk about it. She said it was too difficult a topic.
Aubrey?
Saba collected her thoughts.
I don't think I know that name. Gorram and I haven't reunited with any dwarves in years. She's probably much younger than us.
She is younger, yes.
Niwa confirmed.
Speaking of children, she's about to have a baby.
By herself?
Saba said with a slight flinch.
She's brave, but perhaps this is her wish. The dwarven elders would give their blessings to a child entering the world. There aren't many of us left, which is why I wanted to record as many stories as I could remember for you in my journal. We dwarves need all the help we can get, although we're often too stubborn to accept it.
To hear his mother speak of dwarves as though they were an endangered species fascinated Rakaru. He'd never met any other dwarves besides his parents and Aubrey. He wished Saba hadn't failed to explain the facsimile of their home, but wondered if her mentioning a dwarven outpost had anything to do with it.
Did you send us to your old house? We weren't sure, but it looks so similar to home.
They hadn't been speaking for long, but Rakaru was terrified this summon would end and their mother would abruptly disappear.
Oh, that's right, the house.
Saba said.
It looks like home, because it is home. Well, our house is, or was, very, very old. Gorham could explain this much better than I could, but I'll try my best. This world and our world were once the same. The original was split into 3 copies instead of being destroyed. Your father and I left with you, but we went on to the other world, the 3rd copy. We arrived at that outpost, which resembles our home and Aubrey's home. They're different now because people change the world all the time. Their varied behaviors cause different outcomes, and over time, those changes can make identical worlds look very different.
The Tikis.
Clyde said quietly. The slavers had affected this world by transforming her people into much larger and aggressive-looking creatures. Mandragora Rose had called her a true Tikis, which she understood differently now.
That's right, Clyde.
Saba said.
I promised it was our intention to explain all of this when you were older and ready to experience things on your own. If only we'd had more time. Gorram and I have been traveling between these worlds for many, many years, and yet I still feel as if there's never enough time.
Saba looked wistfully up at the sky. Out of the corner of her eye, she again noticed the statue holding obsidian and furrowed her brow.
How did all these worlds break apart?
Aiden asked, still holding Niwa's dinner plate. He thought of helping his father locate a framed plate from a curio full of plates decorated with similar imagery. He'd brought it to the roof and then seen that fiery object swoop over his head. Saba looked from the statue to her son. She couldn't believe the timing of his question.
Aiden, that's just it. Only gods have the power to break worlds apart. People worship gods, then fight each other on behalf of gods, believing that power proves them right. Eventually, gods fight and worlds are destroyed. We could survive the gods forever if we all learned to leave them behind. But for now, this world, this life is much bigger than any of us and bigger than Arcana.
You mean the gods do exist?
Aiden asked excitedly. He'd felt the presence with him for as long as he could remember, but she and Gorram had always repudiated any talk about gods. Hearing his mother acknowledge them felt so validating for him.
Yes.
Saba said, dismayed.
Arcana is magic that comes from discipline, study, recorded knowledge, and ability. Your father is a student of Arcana. He believes this magic can shape our lives and destinies for the better. And if we can do this without the gods, then we don't have to worry about them and their wrath and their caprice, destroying us. One god split our world apart before it could be destroyed. That split is the only reason we're alive today. We might not survive if it were to happen again.
You use Arcana too.
Niwa said.
You want us to understand Arcana.
Saba considered her response.
Arcana? Well, no, not exactly. I don't practice it, but I agree with your father that Arcana is important, and I'm glad you children understand it well enough.
You knew how to find me. It wasn't Arcana. You wrote, you channeled your thoughts.
Trembling, Clyde retrieved Saba's hidden letter from her pocket, holding it up. She recalled a very early memory of Saba's face. Seeing her before she and Gorram had adopted her, dread rose in her, which she struggled to process. She turned away so her family couldn't read her emotions.
My wonderful Clyde,
Saba said.
You are wise beyond your years. Please don't be afraid of your ability. It is similar to my own. Clairvoyance is something special we share. And yes, it's how I was able to find you. It's how I knew you'd find my letter. When people want to help you, you'll know.
Aiden felt upset and confused.
You're saying you found us. Was Clyde lost? Was I lost?
Well, Aiden, you sort of found Gorram and me.
Saba said.
And you told us your name is Aiden. I'm not sure who Cavalon is. You speak that name sometimes when you're sleeping.
Aiden was getting flustered. He didn't want to discuss his nightmare.
Don't you want to help us? I feel like everything is a secret I don't understand. I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Your father is building a new camera obscura.
Saba looked mildly frustrated with Aiden.
We want nothing more than to see you all again.
Clyde was still facing away from the group, tense and self-conscious. Niwa increasingly felt like the barriers keeping their parents away kept growing stronger, making her despair. Ricariu had so many questions, which caused him to feel overwhelmed, and Aiden appeared hurt. His mother's words had failed to comfort him.
You're supposed to live.
Saba said to Aiden.
You children are so special, and I bet you could do anything if you put your minds to it and worked together. Make the most out of this time we have. I believe in you.
I love you.
Niwa replied, letting herself feel vulnerable.
I love you too.
Saba replied.
All of you, my wonderful children.
It was unclear if the summon spell had expired, or if their mother had chosen her own exit. She vanished as the sun began to set below the crumbling wall. The siblings stood before the statue, processing their feelings and thoughts about their parents.
They're alive.
Niwa said finally.
I knew they were. Aiden, I told you they survived.
I'm really glad.
Aiden said.
I just don't think we have a home to go back to anymore.
I suspect you're right.
Rikaryu said.
I'm going to keep reading all this material. Maybe it'll help us understand what we can do to reach them again.
2 people at the Tikas camp want to help us.
Clyde had been thinking about how Saba had said people who wanted to help will make themselves known to her.
Their names are Copperwolf and Gusk. I've met them already.
You met them?
Aiden asked. His sister nodded. He understood this was all the information he would get.
I wonder if Mitra has named the pups yet.
Niwa said.
I still can't wait to see them open their eyes.
Yeah,
Aiden said, smiling.
we've got a busy day ahead of us tomorrow.
Chapter 59. Displacement.
How are they? Are they still together?
Gorram had waited anxiously for Saba to return. In her brief absence, he had set aside all his drafting materials and found a chair, now offering it to Saba. He hoped they'd had plenty of good news to discuss.
What a jarring experience.
Saba sat, getting her bearings. Returning to the heat and humidity, she realized how much she'd missed crisp air.
Did you know Niwa was going to summon me? I wish I could see them from this world.
I miss them too. So very much.
Gorram shook his head.
I didn't know it would happen, but I'd hoped for a sign.
They're all together.
Saba said.
Like I always say, our children are magnificent. I wish you could have seen them too. It felt like Niwa can sustain her spell a bit longer than before.
Right now, she's more capable than we are in that regard. I don't know how I'll complete this camera obscura here in the swamp. It's not like this outpost has a basement.
Gorram glanced at a panel of black fabric that had come loose from a bamboo frame, dangling pitifully. He rolled his eyes.
She mentioned a woman living in the outpost on that world as well, but I didn't see the children there. They appeared to be squatting in some ruined buildings. Elders used to talk about dwarven generosity. I assumed this woman didn't let the children stay with her. I'm not saying I approve of that decision, but I understand.
Saba leaned back, resting her head. She chose not to mention the temple grounds.
Do we know this woman?
Gorram asked, groaning.
Our children are in ruined buildings. I'm still certain this was the best of all the bad choices.
No.
Saba said.
Her name is Aubrey. She's younger than us. We've been out of touch with everyone for so long. I wouldn't know her parents, surely.
Our numbers are dwindling everywhere. Yet the Southern Valley Outpost is occupied on all 3 worlds. Can you imagine? Dwarven fortune indeed.
Gorram secured the loose fabric, then climbed down from the table.
It's easy for us to feel frustrated, even melancholy right now. But we have reasons for hope and joy. I'm going to imagine seeing our children again instead. And I want to thank you, by the way.
Saba studied him, waiting for a reaction.
Thank me? What did I do?
Gorram dusted his footprints off the table.
It's what you didn't do,
Saba said.
I expected an inquisition. I thought you'd be concerned. I shared too much information with our children. But you didn't ask me about that. I'm glad you trust my judgment. I think our children deserve to know the truth regarding how they became our family. This brief, wonderful moment with them was not the time for it.
I agree that they'll accept what we've done. In time. I haven't thought to ask you about your conversation, Mostly because I'm just thankful they're alive.
Gorm leaned on Saba's shoulder.
They are. I think they want to go home.
Saba could feel his perspiration, but welcomed his sweet gesture despite the mild discomfort.
They certainly speak for everyone.
Gorm said.
It's only a matter of time until the hobgoblins leave the area feeling avenged. To them, we are history. We can always try to rebuild. They won't get anywhere without a camera obscura, though.
Saba wasn't convinced.
Yes, let's rebuild. You were right. We can't keep running away.
Channeling her thoughts, she attempted to will the children into another summon as soon as possible. Chapter 60. Floating Away. The siblings were leaving for the Tikas camp in the morning. The rain had arrived overnight, creating pattering and dripping noises above them. In a hammock, Ricario listened to the rain, thinking about his bed back home. He would listen to the rain and imagine puddles outside growing larger. He'd loved the idea that rainwater might rise up to the loft, in through the windows, and carry him away on a floating bed. His sensibilities reminded him such an occurrence would endanger his family. Then he thought about the flooding rain he created earlier, which did endanger everyone. He watched Mitra across the room, tending to her pups with Shofi, then trying to rest. Preparing to meditate, Ricario had an idea.
Oxbow, can you hear my thoughts? I feel like you are all around me in this rain. I'd like to speak with you.
Ricario meditated.
I am always close to you.
Oxbow said. The voice, but not the image of the Jinni, presented in Ricario's mind.
I am concerned about what happened the other night. I realize now that my anger was misplaced. You saved my life, and I tried to cast you away. I apologize for my behavior. I never meant to hurt anyone, especially my family.
Ricario considered his words carefully.
The Jinni inside you is not I. Venturi has been with you a long time. I hope the three of us can reunite beneath the waves soon. The water calls to you. I will await you there and will explain everything.
Oxbow's tone was calm and steady before and after the apology. Ricario flinched. His meditation was nearly interrupted as the sound of the rain outside grew louder. He now had a name for the being who compelled him to the water and flowed through his turquoise arm.
I'd like that.
Ricario said.
Before I can visit the water, I must travel with my family. They need me. Would you be able to help me?
He wondered if the Jinn were compassionate or spiteful creatures.
Love involves many sacrifices.
Oxbow paused.
What can I do to help?
One of my friends has just delivered her children.
Ricario meditated on the concept of pure joy before continuing.
They are so small and delicate. We are traveling in the morning, but she cannot carry them all. I was imagining a raft of sorts. Although we travel by land, could a Jinni manifest flowing water beneath a raft to carry them all to our destination? I used to dream about something like this when I was younger.
Will you walk the water with them? I crave the closeness of you, my bulwark.
Oxbow said.
Of course I will.
Ricario said.
I also crave the water. It is always on my mind.
Time eluded him. Ricario heard cooing noises from Mitra's area and refocused on the room. His siblings were all asleep. Squinting, he could see Mitra appeared to be sleeping as well. He smiled, closing his eyes to wait for the morning. Chapter 61. Home Stretch. Aiden collected all the remaining food, concerned about staying on the hilltop any longer than absolutely necessary.
I'm afraid we're having rice again. Do you think we'll get to this camp soon?
Aubrey seemed to think so.
Niwa didn't enjoy her critical tone. She was craving a hearty breakfast, which almost made her miss the inn at Silk Rhode. She'd tolerate the smoky odor for another homemade meal. Aiden thought to rebut her, but Ricario interrupted.
I meditated on that earlier.
Ricario said.
I have an idea. but it's going to sound strange. Mitra, if I could promise you a comfortable way to travel, would you be ready to leave with us today?
I am eager to get to this camp, yes.
Mitra wasn't quite sure how to respond. She was not used to making choices on her own behalf. The offer of unsolicited comfort to the camp felt so unreal, she suspected it was a cruel joke.
That's good news. Now, since we're leaving, are we done with this door?
Ricario gestured his turquoise hand toward the entrance of the dormitory.
What are you even saying?
Aiden sounded incredulous.
Yeah, we're leaving. I guess we're done with the whole building.
Anything can become a cart if it's easy to move,
Ricario said.
I told you, it'll sound strange. Niwa, could you help me remove it?
Let's all go outside first.
Clyde spoke up before anyone could comment about the building collapsing. She still felt self-conscious from the earlier accident. The rain had stopped earlier that morning. Outside, the siblings ate rice and watched their brother drag the wooden door onto the wet ground. After some huffing and head-scratching, he retrieved the black rope still tied to the pulleys. With plenty of length to spare, he began wrapping the rope around the door.
Mitra, I just realized something.
Niwa said.
Is there anyone you would like me to summon for you? Anyone you're missing and would like to see again? I'd be happy to do it.
How is it?
Mitra choked up, unable to speak for a moment.
You children are so... How could anyone ever think to act so kindly? This cannot be real. I don't know what to say.
Tearfully, she glanced at Ricario, realizing he had not joked with her earlier.
I didn't mean to upset you.
Niwa said.
I know.
Mitra said.
You didn't upset me. I have never known this kindness. You told Aubrey this world is lonely and vicious. You were right, but that has not stopped you. It is a miracle.
She looked at the newborn sleeping in her arms.
We have Professor Gorram and Miss Saba to thank for it. They must have raised us right.
Aiden was pleased to honor their parents while leaning into the compliment.
Saba told us to work together.
Clyde said.
That's what they wanted most. We would never be together if they hadn't brought us together. There was a plan.
Saba's letter had left Clyde wondering why she, Atticus, was brought to be raised by dwarves with a human, an elf, and a gnome. In any other circumstances, she'd suspected they'd never team up organically.
Well, I hope the Tika's camp is also kind.
Niwa said.
I hope so too.
Mitra enjoyed expressing hope aloud.
The free Tikas are the ones I look forward to seeing the most. Thank you, Niwa.
Almost ready,
Ricario called.
Clyde, could you help me secure this rope? I don't feel confident tying knots.
He looked down, studying his handiwork.
Is that supposed to be the cart? We are not pushing anyone down this hill on a sled. That's an awful idea, Rook.
Aiden stood to investigate.
Oxbow, Venturi, are you with me? Let's all walk the water together.
Ricario knelt, touching his turquoise hand to the ground. Clyde checked the rope for him.
Who are you talking to?
Aiden walked over. The wet ground beneath the door glistened as water ebbed to the surface. Ricario watched his arm disappear, collected into a sheet of water upon which the door floated. He grabbed the end of the rope, slinging it over his shoulder. The siblings observed with surprise. Niwa realized she hadn't seen her brother cast any spell. Smiling, Ricario walked back toward the dormitory. The water rippled as he walked through it, and the makeshift raft floated easily behind him.
Mitra, you were right.
Ricario looked at his companions.
After all that rain, the spirit never left me. It took some time and meditation, but I think I can finally explain all of this. There's a Jinni named Venturi who shares my elven body. I've learned this other being has been with me since I was a child. They've agreed to help us get to the camp.
A Jinni?
Niwa was shocked and confused.
You mean there's a person stuck inside your body? They've been in there your entire life? Are you standing on them right now?
I thought it was Oxbow.
Aiden said, concerned.
Is somebody controlling you? I have no idea what you're trying to tell us.
A Jinni comes from beyond this world,
Ricario said.
I didn't mean to be coy earlier when discussing getting home via the plane of water. I believe that's where the Jinn come from. Oxbow is another Jinni, and he saved my life. I think I'm able to manipulate water with their help.
Do you trust them?
Aiden trusted his brother, but he didn't trust unknown beings with the safety of his family.
I don't know.
Ricario dropped his shoulders.
I wasn't thinking of it like that. I think Venturi and I are in this together. We depend on each other to get by. It's almost like a metaphor for our own situation.
Almost. But we trust each other completely.
Niwa said.
I'm willing to go for it if you think it's a good idea, Rook.
Thank you, Niwa.
Rokario said.
I think, well, it feels like I've been dreaming about this for a long time. I know this all sounds very strange.
It isn't strange.
Aiden said, grinning.
Our dreams are full of meaning. Miss Saba used to tell us that. So, how does this raft thing work?
Clyde wondered if their mother had found Rokario because of his ability. Her letter had mentioned channeling her thoughts before finding the young Tikas. Saba had always praised her children for being special, and perhaps the word implied a condition for finding such different young people in the world. If family trusted each other, why had all these secrets remained hidden for so long? Clyde noticed Mitra standing up and rushed to help her gather the pups for the big trip. Chapter 62. Starlings. On the makeshift raft, Aiden had begun towing Clyde, Mitra, and the newborns. Everyone had studied the traveling patch of water, floating all the Tikas in its center, and constantly changing its height and volume for a smooth ride down the slope. As envisioned, the group had returned to the valley with little difficulty. Sholfi was leading them to the next destination, the hidden Tikas camp. Niwa felt bittersweet atop the primeval bobcat. While delighting in the ride, she repeatedly looked down, hoping to catch a glimpse of Azaka. The shallow water surrounding them rippled with every step, making any reflections blurry and indistinct. Rokario walked beside his brother, feeling helpful and content. Ankle deep in the water, he focused on the way his body felt. Was he really separated from the Jinni? Reminiscing about Gorham's trainings, he spoke a few words to create flame in his hand.
What's with the fire?
Aiden raised an eyebrow.
I feel more in touch with my own arcana right now,
Rokario said.
It might sound silly, but I needed to know I could do this. It's like the opposite of water, in a way. Not quite as exciting, though.
Are you convincing me or them?
Aiden glanced at the watery chariot beside them. Rokario laughed.
Neither, I promise. I have to say, all of us traveling together like this feels auspicious. I know we'll reunite with Gorram and Saba soon enough, but just think of the twists and circumstances that brought us all together like this.
I wish Azaka were leading us.
Niwa didn't mean to ruin her brother's well-intentioned words.
But I am thankful we're all here together. I don't know what I would do without you all.
So this is family.
Mitra said.
The words are nice. The Tikas, though, I think our love is shown in our actions.
Clyde noticed Mitra smiling at her. No one had ever explained her motivations so succinctly. Clyde would do anything for her family, and Mitra had understood that from the beginning. Shelfie abruptly turned and the whole procession followed along. They'd been traveling under dense forest cover for some time, but another slope came into view. Moving closer, Niwa could see a narrow passage between the hills. The rock formations partially blocked the sunlight above.
I guess we're going through here,
Niwa said, looking up. She noticed a large flock of birds moving above them, making lovely swirls and patterns as they flew.
The circumstance you're talking about is rescuing Mitra.
Aiden continued his brother's statement.
I know it caused a lot of trouble for everyone, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. I am responsible for Zach's death, though. I realize that.
He glanced at the wrapped body on the makeshift raft.
We're all trying to do the right thing. We just need to stick together.
Rokario wondered how long they could stay together. He had already promised Oxbow a meeting after their travel. Would his family accompany him there?
Oh!
Niwa was surprised to see one of the flock landing on Sholfi's head. The elegant black bird had a scattering of tiny white spots all over its body. The bobcat continued walking, not minding the new rider at all.
Niwa, is that your bird?
Aiden was surprised the animal stayed in place, looking forward.
Yeah, it's my bird that I've had all this time.
Niwa couldn't help but respond to a foolish question in kind.
Where did it come from?
Aiden recognized the sarcasm and moved on.
There was a flock overhead when we entered this passage. It seems to know Shelfie. I bet it means we're getting close.
Niwa shook with excitement.
That's a starling.
Clyde said, surprising herself to remember that.
We have those back home.
Is that what they're called? What a fitting name. I like that. Perhaps they are common across the worlds.
Ricario caught a glimpse of the flock in the narrow band of sky overhead.
It's a miracle.
Mitra said, looking forward. The passage was opening up. Everyone emerged together, adjusting their eyes to the sunlight once more. Beyond the trees was a circular dirt clearing. Tika's children were playing a sport, running in the circle and tossing a large ring to each other. They stopped, marveling at the flowing water carrying new visitors.
This must be the place, Mitra.
Aiden looked at her, a warm smile spreading across his face. Within himself, he felt an ember of pride struggling to burn for so long, finally draw fresh air. The bird took flight, dashing toward the sun, then rejoining the starlings suddenly appearing overhead. The flock swirled and settled in the trees beyond the clearing. Beneath them, a few Tikas residents emerged from stilted row houses to investigate.
They see Shelfie.
Clyde was relieved to see a few of the Tikas children waving at the group. They appeared larger than her, physically resembling Mitra. Clyde felt paralyzed with anxiety. An unrecognizable piece of the puzzle in her mind just clicked into place. The air faintly smelled of Tikas. She knew the smell she couldn't remember. Mitra took her hand. Smiling, Clyde let the tears fall. Together, they waved back. The end. Across the Sun Episode 12 was voiced by Danielle Bouchard as Clyde, Julia Boudreau as Niwa, Bill Robinson as Aiden, Jason Pagano as Ricario, Sarah Luz as Mitra, Aaron Martin Colby as Gorram, Julie Dalpy as Saba, and James Stacy as Oxbow. Narrated by, edited, scored, mixed, and mastered by Thomas Wells. Some sound effects and music acquired from Zapsplat.com. This has been a presentation of Across the Sun by Jason Pagano and Bill Robinson, brought to you by Silk Rhode Books. Thank you all for listening. To follow the Across the Sun saga, see all the official artwork and fun facts for the series, please visit silkroadebooks.com.